was introduced to the sport by my wife actually. Inspiration actually came in when I actually played it. So it's a sport. I mean, I'm 168 kgs. I'm 38 years old. It's one of those sports where actually I can actually play the sport, and I can have somebody who's 24 years old, is probably top ranked in India or in Asia, stand next to me in a doubles game, and we can have somebody on the opposite side with a similar kind of a ranking, and somebody on my side, like Mr. Vineet Jain and I. We played a game with two of the top female athletes in India, and it was competitive for all four of us basically. So I was on one side with one of the girls, and Mr. Jain was on the other side with one of the girls, and it was a competitive game. So the beauty of this sport is it's inclusive. So this is where this is how I got hooked to the sport. With pickleball, the advantage is that before it becomes a broadcasted sport, it will become a very participative sport. So we're talking about hundreds of millions of people. Now, in order to convert those people to actually watch the sport, there are a lot of things which go into it, and I think that over a period of time we'll find out. But I think there is a huge chance that this becomes not just the most played sport in the world, but also a highly broadcasted sport. In Pickleball World Rankings and World Series, what we've got is the World Series are your marquee events, kind of like the Grand Slams. And then you've got Pickleball World Rankings, which is kind of like your ATP, which is the pathway to the World Series. The World Tour is your Pickleball World Ranking events across the globe. If you play in those World Ranking events, you will then be able to qualify for the World Series. World Series is going to be the highest prize money event in pickleball across the globe. And so it becomes sort of an aspirational event. We wanted to create a pathway for somebody who's 7 years old, 8 years old, picking up the pickleball paddle, and then be able to see how do I go from here to making a career out of it. And that's what we created basically. So we have Pickleball World Rankings, which essentially gives you a progression, but at the same time the World Tour is where you go and play and gain those ranking points, and then you qualify for the World Series. Right now, what we're experiencing, especially in Asia, is that we've got first-generation pickleball players. So in the US, when the sport grew, a lot of the tennis players migrated from tennis into pickleball. And initially in India as well, and in Asia also, we saw that. But now what is happening is that we've got first-generation players. I mean, this morning I got an email from somebody in India whose son is 7 years old, and they wanted to know how do they play into different events. And so I think that way India and Asia is an opportunity to introduce first-generation players into pickleball, and so a structure of juniors would be very relevant in both World Rankings and World Series. Absolutely, I think, and that's the grander vision. I mean, I think all of this allows us to access that grander vision. 2036 Olympics in all probability will be in India and Ahmedabad, and Ahmedabad is already one of the biggest pickleball communities in India. 250 courts in Ahmedabad right now, a lot of players playing, and I think that vision is dual-fold for us basically. For us, we want to have pickleball in the Olympics in 2036 in India, but also the first Olympic champion from India. I think one of the key things from a pro aspect of it is that we need to provide athletic prowess. We need to also have broadcaster-friendly, point systems, which is, right now it has service points. We see that it shifts to rally points basically. We also, envisage that going forward there will be certain rule changes here and there to make the sport more broadcaster-friendly. I think those are the few things that we see. From a rec play point of view, I think because it's so inclusive and a participative sport, recreational play would follow similar trends for the time being, because people have gotten used to that. But I think on the pro side, we will introduce certain changes. Pickleball World Series actually is a league and a tour. So there is a team series component to it, and so does the India League and Tour has a team series component attached to it. So we will have team-based competition, which we believe is going to be quite popular across the globe. You have to be amongst the top 24. We expect to have 6 teams with 4 players on each team. So you have to be amongst the top 24 players, 2 men, 2 women. For the World Series, actually, what we're doing something which is very interesting is that we've got 12 players from the United States and 12 players from the rest of the world, because obviously United States, having the history for pickleball, has some of the top players. So we want to get some of the top players, one of whom you will see tonight, Megan Fudge, who's the #1 player on the circuit in the US. So we want to get some of the top players from the US, and we want to get some of the top players from the rest of the world. Probably a couple of players from Asia, and India also will qualify in that range. And then create a 4-member team and have 6 teams in the first year, and then have, by the end of the 7th year, we feel an expansion of about 20 to 24 teams would be possible with the talent that's going to come across from across the globe. I feel in Asia, institutions take care of the infrastructure, specifically like schools, colleges, condominiums, and we're seeing that even in Bennett University, we've got now 8 plus 12 courts now in Bennett University. So I think schools and colleges will take care of a lot of the infrastructure side of it. A lot of people will play on badminton courts initially, and that's fine. As far as paddle, like the cost of the racket is concerned, I think that's where we've taken the onus on ourselves to actually bring the supply chain in-house as opposed to importing from China, and because it gets expensive in India. So I think one of the key things for pickleball and mass participation in pickleball is the cost of the racket, and I think you see that in table tennis and you see that in badminton. Badminton being the most played sport in India, you get a racket for less than 100 rupees if you wanted to start off with, and I think that's where eventually pickleball needs to go to be in that price range of 100 or 300 rupees, wherein people can access the sport at a very early stage, because the investments at that level, when we spoke about the junior category, are being made by parents. So, and parents are either looking at it being an Olympic sport as an opportunity to get a government job, or some kind of pathway like the World Series. And then they look at investing in a paddle. And I think that for them, the first paddle has to be very accessible. Once a child gets better, and there's progress made, then obviously there are opportunities to get a more expensive paddle, but I think initially the accessibility has to be there. As an athlete, I think because naturally our bodies go through a process. I mean, there are certain athletes like Ronaldo and Virat, and who perform beyond a certain age. Federer and Djokovic is young still relatively, but they perform beyond a certain age. But you'll have once in a generational talent who'll come in and play at those ages. I mean, Rohan being one of them as well. But I think for pickleball, or just like any other sport, even at the top level, I think it's going to have a similar shelf life than any other sport, because athletic prowess is important, and I think that's very much needed. Right now, it's at that stage where it's very nascent. So you've got some pros who are relatively a little bit older, but I think as the World Series comes in, it gets competitive, it's high prize money, high stakes. First generation pickleball players come in, it's going to get into that similar category of pros with the shelf life. It's a great opportunity for a lot of the tournament operators across the globe to tie up with the Pickleball World Rankings and also to be part of this global phenomenon. And I think a lot of them are reaching out to become a part of it. It's one of those things where it allows an event happening in like Peru, for example. There's an event happening in Peru which is adopting Pickleball World Rankings to have some kind of comparison with players in India, players in Japan, players in China, players in Australia. So we've got the event happening in Peru, which is powered by PWR. We've got an event happening in Venezuela. We've got an event happening in Spain. We've got events happening in Japan, China, India, Australia, Canada. The whole Canadian Pro Tour is powered by PWR. So all of these guys, and then we just this morning announced our partnership with Minor League Pickleball in the US, where we have close to 200 plus events happening with PWR ranking. So everybody now being ranked at a certain scale will then be able to compare each other from a ranking perspective. And also, we need that as a pathway to qualify for the World Series. So I think across the globe, one of the key things that we're announcing that next year in 2025, we'll have close to about 500 events which are qualifying events. And I think those are very critical because that's how the pathway becomes successful. Now, there are 42 countries in Latin America, 48 countries in Asia, there are countries in Africa that we want to tie in with, and collectively, Europe, Canada, North America, and collectively, and then Australia, we're already speaking. So collectively, if we're able to tie in and have events across the globe, it automatically, they all then look at these 6 events and progress year on year. So somebody who's at 7 years old can then say, I want to play that event at 17, right? And I want to win that 1.5, which probably by the time they're 17 is going to be much higher. So that's how we're looking at it essentially. And the impact that it has globally is huge, right? Because then you've got this whole tour across the globe, which is kind of under one umbrella, and you're able to then participate in events which feels inclusive across the globe. We touched upon this earlier. I think with pickleball being so easy, you can play on concrete anywhere, and cemented indoor halls. You just need a net and tape the lines basically. I think the sport is at a stage where it can grow into all these areas, and it has actually. Some of the few of the top players in India actually came from Jalgaon initially, which and then they moved to Mumbai to start playing professionally, and now they're training and teaching other kids. So the idea is that if we have the India tour across India in 12 cities, so hopefully we are able to reach and give access to these kids who are either playing in cities like we've got. I know they're coached in Bhilai, they're coached in Jharkhand, they're coached in Chhattisgarh. So those kids, we want to be able to make sure that we have events close to them so that they have access to these events. And I think as we introduce that India tour, these are the talents that are going to come out. I think for the series, I think for us it was, we had a great backing from the Times Group. Mr. Vineet Jain playing himself, that helped quite a bit. But I think the belief in that vision that we can create a global ranking system coming out of India, I think that's where that belief was very important. That vision was very important for us. We weren't. I mean, when I first sat down and had that discussion, had the first discussion with Mr. Jain, I told him, I said, leagues are dime a dozen right now in India. Like, there's so many leagues which come up, and they come up with the same kind of template of IPL and broadcasting. But for us, it was very important that if there is investment being made into this, we need to make sure that we are able to make a major impact across the globe. So I think we took a more global approach. And I think with different projects that the Times Group does, they do have that global vision as well. So I think that kind of helped us. So we were lucky to have the backing from day one, but also I think we had that vision from day one as well.